So, I had this big brain genius idea. I wanted to fix up the banner on the YouTube channel. I wanted to add a new image, and I thought, what would be a better image than posing the caterpillar next to the dragonfly on the surface of Daymar? And I kind of wanted to do it in an isolated place, not really at Shubin Mining or anything like that. So I figured, you know what, I'll just fly the caterpillar to Grim Hex, pick up the dragonfly, load it in, and then just sort of load it in, almost getting there. Get it down to the surface, pose the two things next to each other, take a great background shot with hopefully like the sun rising in the background. It'd be awesome. That's all I wanted to do. So I finally get the dragonfly off the caterpillar, but I noticed the landing legs, as you could just see for a moment there in the lower corner, were completely flipping out. So I flip back to look at the ship, and yeah. Being a Drake owner, you're used to it. It's something of a roller coaster ride. It can be quite challenging at times. And today we're going to talk about what some people assume is the anti-Drake conspiracy at CIG. There's always been, I think, since the beginning of Star Citizen, a feeling amongst a lot of people that Drake ships were just flat out inferior to the other manufacturers. In the early days, there was very few sale brochures for this ship or that ship, especially the military ones, where they would put in a little blurb, talking about all these different companies, submitted designs, and Drake's was dismissed out of hand, that sort of thing. And I think that there was this kind of foundation laid for the idea that Drake ships were somewhat second rate or not good enough. And I think that kind of plays an important role in what we're going to talk about. But truthfully, is there an anti-Drake conspiracy? I don't think so. I think that there is a Drake concern. I would characterize it that way. That I think that at CIG there is a concern that perhaps Drake is maybe just a little too good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tackle a few of the Drake ships. I'm going to talk about them individually, and I think talk about why I think CIG has done what they've done, or why they are omitting certain things from certain ships. And then I'm going to kind of break it up in a way that I don't think that there's an overarching Drake conspiracy against the manufacturer, but I think that there is an issue that links all the ships that I don't think that CIG fully appreciates, or at least on certain levels, certain individuals may not fully appreciate what the situation is with Drake and how this has emerged. But I think that on an individual basis, I think that certain Drake ships have been trimmed, let's say, in a diplomatic way, because on an individual basis, they represent something that CIG isn't comfortable with, and I don't think that it's an overall let's get Drake and knock him out of the running, or let's knock these ships down, they're too good. I think that it breaks down more as it's a case-by-case thing, but there is something going on with all the Drake ships, but I don't think that CIG fully grasps what that is. Now, the first and best example is the Buccaneer. The Buccaneer, I would say, as a light fighter, with its maneuverability and with its awesome firepower for a light fighter, if it wasn't for the fact that it was so structurally weak, it would be dominant. It would be a dominant fighter. I mean, you think about the defects that the ship has. One, the wingtip cannons, it makes no sense. And a lot of people ask that, when the size 1s went to gimbal, does that mean that the wingtips on the on the Buccaneer we're going to go to gimbaled as well, and they were not. That was left off the table. And I think that the reason is because it just has so much firepower. If you think about its competition, mainly the Gladius or the Arrow, the Buccaneer just has so much more firepower than they do. I feel that with its fragility, which is, I think, overtuned at the moment, being as fragile as it is, it maybe should have size 1 gimbals on the wingtips. So to give it lean more into that glass cannon thing. But I think that was an added limitation put on the ship to make sure that it doesn't really compete all that well with its heavier, more prestige manufacturer, competition, being the Anvil Arrow and the Aegis Gladius. I think that CIG kind of wants to keep this ship in a position where it feels that it is not as good as the other two, but because it was so over delivered in firepower, I don't think that they really perceived the role that it would end up playing if it was resilient. I think that's why it has been kind of knocked down. They use the comment paper thin, and to be honest, in the original write-ups for this ship, they didn't describe it as being all that resilient, though they did describe it as being easily repaired. And I think that lack of resiliency, that lack of structural strength, is a deliberate kind of move to kind of temper the ship. And certainly when it first came out, it was very strong. You could ram just about any ship with the Drake Buccaneer and it would kill them instantly, whereas the Buccaneer would be fine. Some of that was a bug, of course, but I think that the Buccaneer performed so well in its early days that CIG maybe hit it a little too hard on the fragility scale. But I think that that's why, in the situation of the Buccaneer, that's why it's happened, is they don't want this thing out there and being too good against things like the Anvil Arrow and the Gladius. Now, the Caterpillar, I think, is something of a different story. Of course, we have made fun of this on this channel many, many times. The Raid Commander, the Drake Caterpillar, the heavily armed, no, scratch that, heavily armored, no, scratch that, just a regular cargo ship. We've made fun of these things many, many times, and it's been great. But seeing the ship kind of fall into where it has landed has been not so great. We were hoping for a little bit more of an edge, a little bit steamier of a ship. And of course, this promo image being from one of these early on blurbs where this is leading the pirate group, and those are guns on the front of the ship. Those were the original size 6 guns before they were removed. And I mean, an argument I feel could be made to doubling up the turret mounts on this ship, as in not adding another 2 turrets, but turning the turrets from dual mounts to quad mounts. I think a fair argument could be made in that respect for the ship. But I think that as a cargo ship, because it performs so well and because there is so much work yet to be done on the Drake Caterpillar, I don't think that they're going to overcomplicate that by adding too much onto their plate. I mean, think about it. They got to do all the pods. They got to make them interchangeable. They have to invent new pods. They have to make all the elevators work, and there may be some lingering issues with that because the elevators may not be able to reach all the way down to the ground because, once again, you got that bottom turret limiting the space underneath the ship. So the legs may not allow the ship to drop far enough for the elevators all around the ship to actually hit the ground, apart from the main cargo one underneath the center section of the ship. In a strange way, I think that much the way the Polaris slipped in to fill the Corvette slot that the Idris emptied when it moved up to a frigate, the Corsair is intended to fill the role of the original Caterpillar. I think that that's kind of where they've sized things up and where they've kind of decided things are going to go. And I think that the Caterpillar is going to continue to exist as a very good cargo ship Who knows? Maybe some other potential down the road. But as a solid cargo ship, I think the Caterpillar is going to continue on like that, and the Corsair is going to end up taking on that sort of raid commander role within, the Drake lineup of ships. Now, the Corsair also, I would say, has a potential vulnerability in the future. Now, you've heard me talk about the Corsair a lot, and I've been a big proponent of this ship. But my concern with the Corsair is that it may suffer the same fate as the Buccaneer because it has so much firepower. It has a lot of firepower. And if it has the traditional Drake speed to go along with it, it could end up being quite a force to be reckoned with, and CIG may not be comfortable with that. The addition of the 2 side turrets on the ship, which was kind of a deft move by CIG. It's kind of like we added more guns. There's more firepower on the ship, but realistically there isn't, because the guns aren't all that all that practical to use. The fact that they didn't just put a turret on top of the ship with 4 more probably speaks more to their fear of having too much firepower pointing in one direction. And that may be something that comes to pass with the Corsair, that CIG might look at it and say, it's a little bit too powerful, and how paper thin can we make something of this size? Probably not all that much. So you're hearing me talk about Drake ships, and you're hearing me talk about these specific examples and saying, well, this is probably what CIG isn't going to do, and they're probably not going to give this ship that, and they're not going to give this ship the other thing. And of course, past history with other Drake ships have been kind of spotty with CIG. So how can I say that there isn't some kind of anti-Drake conspiracy, right? Like, oh, we got to get those Drake ships, they're too good, I think that the problem isn't so much that, it's that I don't think that CIG understands the mechanism that causes Drake ships to become as good as they are. And in a weird way, I think that that's kind of where you get this reflex action of, oh, we gotta pull this back. Oh, no, we can't put a top turret on the Corsair. Oh, no, we can't put size 6 guns on the Caterpillar. Oh no, the Buccaneer's got to be weak. All of these other things. The Herald can never have a job, I think that what happens is that when CIG designs a ship from any other manufacturer, they go, okay, we got to get the look right. We got to get the feel right. Oh, I should probably tweet out some different ideas about the wood paneling I'm going to use on the bar in this ship and see what people think about that. You never see any of that superfluous bullshit with the Drake ships. All the assets are there. Most of the ships have a large chunk of them already built. They already know how it all goes together. So I think that what the artists end up doing is they don't end up focusing so much on this minutia that really isn't all that relevant to a ship's performance. And instead, in lieu of that, they focus on performance, and they focus on things like practicality, usability. Does it have a big enough cargo space? Do the ramps work? All this sort of little stuff like that. They focus on all these things that really matter in ship design. Does it have a Drake cockpit? In other words, is it open? Can I see out of it? All of these things. And I think that a lot of these things are the real strengths of the Drake ships. And when you're not wasting all your time worrying about wood paneling and, looking at paint swatches and going like, oh, what color looks best? And you're more worried about where do I keep my guns and, should I have a little smuggling space on my ship? It's those things that really kind of make the Drake ships shine. I mean, the Cutlass is so popular not because it's like, ooh, look at the interior. Oh, look at these accents. Look at this paint job. No, it's because it's practical. It's usable for so many other jobs. It doesn't close any doors on you. It just kicks all the doors open and says you can do whatever you want with this ship. And it will be passable at just about everything. And I think that in the end, that's kind of where CIG reflexively is trying to take back from Drake without doing it, as specifically targeting the whole lineup. They're targeting individual ships, but they don't really know why. They don't really understand that it's a fundamental thing to the way Drake ships are built, and not really, on a ship-by-ship basis. They see it as a ship-by-ship case where they're like, oh, this ship's too powerful. We should knock that back. Oh, we shouldn't give them all of this, da-da-da-da-da. They're not realizing that the essence of what Drake is as a ship manufacturer is what makes Drake so strong. And so they keep running into these situations where the ships are just too good because they focus on the important things and they don't waste time on the bullshit. I think that that's the leap that CIG can't make, and I'm going to explain it using this analogy. Let's say that all of a sudden a stack of money falls in your lap, and it's enough to buy just about any car you could ever want. Any car. So whether it's the classic sports car or it's the cutting edge sports car, some really, expensive sedan, something like that, whatever your tastes are, doesn't matter. You can buy whatever you want, right? So you might go for something with all kinds of style and something that you would say speaks to you, something that kind of embodies your personality, your ideals, that sort of thing. Doesn't matter what you pick, because you're going to pick something that suits you, something that you like, something that is stylish. But now let's kind of turn that scenario on its head. Same idea, you have a X amount of money, but you know that tomorrow there's going to be some kind of huge disaster, and beyond that, you're going to be fighting for your survival. You're going to be out there. You're going to be trying to get things done. It's going to be kind of like an H1Z1 scum type scenario, post-apocalyptic zombie world type thing. But you have the money to buy that car today. What car do you buy? You're going to think, well, I need something that can possibly go off-road. I need something that's going to have a lot of range. I need something that can carry cargo. I need something that can carry, different clothes. I'm going to have to probably, go out and find water, food, that sort of thing. I'm going to have to range out far and wide to kind of bring things together. Your needs, your wants are going to come into conflict, and you're going to go for your needs probably over your wants. You don't want to be the guy post-apocalypse who's trying to figure out how to get a Lamborghini, up the side of a hill or a mountain, And that's kind of the problem that Star Citizen presents, because Star Citizen requires you to deal with a lot of practical realities within the game, where the style and the cushiness don't really match up. And I think that that's kind of one of the big problems that CIG has, is that Drake ships are, the off-road vehicles. They are the go anywhere, do anything type ships. And so I don't really think that specifically CIG is trying to upturn Drake. I don't think that they're specifically targeting Drake, but I think that they don't realize the relationship that Drake has with the practical needs of the universe versus the other manufacturers. And so that results in a lot of situations where they're like, these are kind of too good. And I don't think they really fundamentally understand why they keep getting into this scenario with Drake ships. In the very early days of Star Citizen, a lot of, if you bought a Drake ship, if you bought the Pirate Pack in the original Kickstarter or something like that, there was a certain element within the community where like, oh, those ships are probably going to be ugly. I don't like the description of them. And, people who buy those are just going to be degenerate pirates anyways. So, blah. And, certainly moving forward, Drake ships were seen as kind of the underclass. They were seen as kind of the unwanted, vehicles in the universe. People were looking for more flashy type vehicles. But as we move beyond the 2.0 series of patches and into the 3.0 series of patches, which is really when we transitioned into the practical universe, where you started having to pick up boxes and put them down somewhere, and where you started needing cargo ramps and things like that. When all of these things became practical, I would say that that's probably when you saw the biggest shift towards Drake ships. The Cutlass probably being the premier one amongst that. And I think overall, Drake has just been much more warmly received by a larger portion of the community. And I think that the reason why is because of all the practical value. And I think that also the lack of emphasis on style and the greater emphasis on practicality has led to the Drake ships just simply being better for the Star Citizen universe. A lot of the fighters and a lot of the smaller ships in this game are designed around the ideal, I would say, of a Squadron 42 type game, whereas the Drake ships were designed for not Squadron 42 but Star Citizen. And I think that you're going to see a lot of manufacturers trying to, in the future, with variants and newer ships that come out, because we know that they're coming, you're going to see other ships trying to horn in on that Drake market, because there are very few ships that compete with Drake directly. And I think that that's kind of why CIG is probably looking at knocking Drake down a little bit. I don't think that it's kind of a malicious conspiracy, but I think that it's a repeating kind of feedback loop that they get trapped into because they don't understand why Drake keeps pulling ahead. Sometimes it's, the functionality and the firepower are just so overwhelming because they're so well designed, versus other times it's just the practical value, as a player experiencing the universe when your ship is right side up. Drake is a very difficult manufacturer to beat.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.